So hi everybody, welcome to today's Recovery from Relapse meeting. Today is Tuesday, the 28th of January, 2025. And today it's our pleasure to have Charlotte D with us. So Charlotte came into OA in 2004 and says she's recovered since November of 2007. Charlotte is from the UK, so Charlotte, it is now over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, my name's Charlotte. I am a compulsive overeater, and I'm really pleased to be with you all today. And there's lots of you, as I can see there. Welcome to everyone in the room, and welcome especially to the newcomer as well. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be here to share. It's part of my step 12 to carry the message. And I was thinking about relapse. Obviously, that's the focus of the meeting. And you may have heard Alan there. So I came into OA in 2004 in the July, and I didn't get abstinent, like maintaining abstinence, until November 3rd, 2007. So in that gap, the first sort of 3 years in OA, I couldn't put the food down. There was relapse. So I thought what I'd do is just explain a bit about what happened during that time and then what changed for me. Because you can go to a lot of meetings. I can go to a lot of meetings. I did go to a lot of meetings in the first 3 years. And I worked my tools and I took direction to a point. And I kept going back into the food. I kept picking up. So I realized on thinking about it, when I looked at it, is that relapse doesn't happen. My relapse, and I can speak for myself, I don't speak for OA as a whole, but my relapse, they don't happen overnight. That was the experience that I had. A relapse happens over time. It's not the food going in the mouth that is the main thing. And that's what I saw from doing step work, and I reworked my step one. So step one, for anyone that's new, is we admitted we were powerless over food, that our lives were unmanageable. And I re-looked at my step one, looking at what my thinking was, looking at the food that I was eating, looking at the choices that I made. And I realized my choices, I worked the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I realized that my choices were dishonest. And I got to out myself by putting them on paper and looking at my thinking, looking at my reasoning, and then identifying with a sponsor what was going on for me. And then that gave me to do it differently. And I realized in recovery, in my recovery, I've been 17 years abstinent, and I've been a UK dress size 18 and a UK dress size 6. So I've been at the low end of the spectrum, and I've been at the higher end of the spectrum. For me, I realized that one size doesn't fit all. And I compulsively overate at both spectrums, whether I was, overweight or whether I was severely underweight. With compulsively eating, I was just doing different things to control my compulsion. So my bulimia, my diet pills, going on a diet, always on a diet, always looking at my body, always wanting it sculpted to perfection. And it's really hard to do that when you can't stop eating, because the two, it's a paradox. They don't go together. And I realized then I relapsed in the first 3 years. At step 4 was my first big relapse. My second big relapse was at step 6. And then my last big relapse, which I honestly nearly died. I was so mentally insane in the food, with a head full of program and a body full of food, and just felt really insane to the point of suicidal. And that was at step 9. And all the way through, there was this resistance to life on life's terms. There was a resistance to wanting to take responsibility for myself and my choices and the consequences. I didn't really want to be grown up in a lot of situations. I found it hard. And there's a bit in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I worked my steps using the big book. And I really identified with it, and I thought I would share it with you today, just to really shape, the things that I say and where I'm coming from with regards to being a compulsive overeater. And fundamentally, I'm here in the rooms because I have a problem with food. I'm not a normal eater. I never will be. And accepting that, it took me 3 years to accept that. I could tell you I was a bulimic, I could tell you I was a dieter or whatever, but a compulsive overeater, once I put food or certain foods or eat in certain ways into my mouth, I cannot stop for love nor money. My whole day is about what, where, and when re food. It's not about you, and it's not about what's going on with my life. The absolute powerlessness over food, causing the unmanageability. And for me, I needed to put the food down, and the manageability came when I did that. The sanity came when I did that, and not the other way around. And on page 37 in the big book, what chapter is it? It's more about alcoholism. There is, and you may be familiar with it, you may not. There's a story about a jaywalker, and it's a really extreme example. And you might think, oh goodness, what's that got to do with food? But I'll change the word alcoholic, or I'll say it, but I'll put compulsive overeater and just relate and see where we go with it. So it says here, our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink, the first compulsive bite, as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him and he's slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he's hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking, compulsively overeating for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful. For me, that's to moderate, to not eat as much as this or a little bit of that, or to keep off the streets altogether. That's it, going on a diet, all the crap comes out the cupboard. I'm going to swear off forever, and I'm never going to binge again. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce. He's held up to ridicule. My diet crashes. I've done 6 months of hectic dieting. I've lost loads of weight, and then I put it all back on in the next 6 months. Everybody sees I feel embarrassed. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We have been through the ringer, have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism, compulsive overeating, for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where the food or the alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. So I'm not that bad. I can do it. I'll do it. Just this once more. I'll try this workout program, or I'm going to go to this different gym and they're going to do this, and I've got this trainer, or I'm going to get some more psychotherapy, or these were all my justifications. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we've not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well that from what we have told you, that such things will never happen again. We've not lost everything in life, compulsively overeating, drinking, and we certainly do not intend to, thanks for the information. And this was me. I remember going to my first OA meeting in 2004, and I really identified, and I cried and I cried and I cried, and I spent a lot of time crying. And then one person said one thing, and I thought, that's not me. I'm not that bad. And I didn't go again, or it's, and I had to get all of these thoughts down on paper when I did my step one with my sponsor, because I was like, well, I'll eat that, but I won't eat that. I'll just have 2 meals a day, or I'm just going to cut out the carbohydrates. I'll cut out the fat, it won't do, I'll be fine. And it was all of it. And I could honestly, I could sit here and I could list about 100 things that are my justifications or my minimizing, or it doesn't matter. I was going, I just remember even from a young age, I mean, this is about relapse, but if I go back before recovery, because my whole life was a relapse because I didn't actually know that I was in the food. But, my compulsive eating started from the age of 6. And I was a real comfort eater. It was the way that I related to life and I related to feelings. Um, there's a great bit in the big book that talks about worry, depression, anxiety, and the like. And I could give you those reasons for compulsively eating all the time, and they seem like they're justifiable reasons. But then I could give you compulsively eating because I want to celebrate success, or I passed my exams, or something positive happened. I hope you can still hear me. It says my internet connection's unstable, so I hope I'm still cool. So there were all of these. I was always, from a young child growing up through to teenage years, very aware of my body from a young age, very aware of food, was very dishonest around food, but I did have a family of feeders. So my grandma was fantastic. She had a whole trolley that came out with the goods, so Saturdays were a particular uh, shine on my week, that and the A-team at the time. And I just eat the trolley, whilst watching the program. And that for me was comfort, watching my programs as a kid, and then just eating and eating. And this happened all throughout my teenage life, until I found what I thought were great appetite suppressants such as speed and amphetamine. And then it got stronger and stronger, and quite dangerously frightening, and involved rehab. But at the foundation of it all was this unhealthy relationship with food. So in terms of the jaywalker and the extremities of his choices, but then the denial the next day. And I always remember somebody telling me that in early recovery, denial standing for don't even know I'm lying. And I could justify to you. And I got, when I got into recovery, I found it hard to get a sponsor, first of all. And that was a problem. So that was my reason for staying in the food, is that I couldn't find a sponsor. And I knew that there were fellows that I could talk to, and I was very aware that there were 9 tools that I could use before I took the compulsive bite. And that's where I say it all the time, but that, the feelings were really intense. So that's why it took me back. And I realized that the big book says a really challenging line. It says we place our, and haven't got the page right now, but it says we place ourselves in positions to be hurt. And I'll pop it in the chat when I find it when my time is up. But I really struggled with that. I didn't think that any of my choices were a direct correlation to, like the food, and ending up in these dangerous situations, or difficult family situations, or difficult romantic situations. And the first 3 years of OA, a guy was like my primary reason for relapse. I was in a relationship, it was totally unhealthy, very toxic and not based, and I knew it wasn't right. And I just wasn't able to maintain my abstinence whilst being in a relationship. And I used that as a big excuse, and it nearly killed me. It nearly killed me. I just couldn't stop eating, or I'd white knuckle it till about 4. Then at 4 p.m. I went hell for leather, just buying all the food. And I'd run out of money as well, so I was in debt quite badly in my overdraft. And I'd worked the food plan at this point with a sponsor. I had 3 different meetings. I had a home group. I was ticking all the boxes, I was ticking all the boxes, and yet I'd go bang, I'd get 6 weeks, feel triumphant, and bang, I'd go back into the food. Or I'd try a diet, or at one point in the relapse, I did start a new set of diet pills. My head is like, can't be listening to the news or adverts. They're all over the place, it seems, at the moment. And I'm like, this is none of my business. And what really helped me was getting a sponsor and doing morning calls to start off with, not the whole way through working the steps, but really talking about the food with my sponsor. That was the one thing I didn't actually want to talk about. Um, just give me a food plan, I'll follow it, and let's do the steps. Spiritual awakening, that's the solution, right? And I had a lot of that. And yes, it is the spiritual solution. Um, at the same time, I can be working towards a spiritual solution, but still be in the food. And that was killing me. It was absolutely killing me. So I started to do an evening food review. So I'd write my food plan in the day, work it with the sponsor, write the food plan. And for me, I kept it simple. I had tried my first year in OA, I tried every food plan going. I was trying to find the perfect one that would work for me. And, certain things don't work for me. I can't do snacks. The less I'm eating throughout the day, the better.
Got 15
So,
minutes left.
thank you. A 15, did you say? Yeah, cool. So a 301 plan, 3 meals a day, nothing in between, works for me. I, started to get honest around the food and looked at patterns of eating, looked at behaviors with my food, and realized there are certain things I am allergic to massively that I don't go near. There are certain behaviors, eating standing up, eating on the couch cross-legged in front of the TV, not good things for me. Going back for second, third, fourth portions, or hanging out by the fridge, or getting somebody I don't know, a guest, a piece of cake, and just keeping the cake in the fridge, all of this stuff, kind of like it was my deception, really. But the only person I was deceiving at the end of the day, it wasn't the sponsor or my fellows or the meeting, it was me. I was the one that went to bed like with, a neck full of food, feeling like my back was breaking and I was going to die of vomit. It really was not a happy experience. And when I got abstinent and started to have gaps, the meal started to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The thing I was willing to do, I was so broken at that point. I had a sponsor that says, rock up into the kitchen and ask your higher power, which I didn't believe in. That was stupid. Lunacy, right? Despite the fact I was killing myself with food, like just the irony of it all. And I had no belief in higher power or anything like that. I could admire beauty, but she said, just do it, just try it. Just what have you got to lose? She said, I'm abstinent. You're not. Why don't you just give it a go? I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll just get my head out of the equation and ask the higher power, please would you guide my hands? Please would you show me what to do? And that could be with a very simple breakfast choice. And I just did it. And then I sat down for the meal and I just committed I was a compulsive overeater and just asked that it would have a beginning, middle, and end. And it was as simple as that to start off with. And that really and that meant for me, I started to see then that, cooking and picking and pecking while I'm eating, and, it has to be a plate of food for me. By the time I get to the table, I have to have a plate of food that's whole. It hasn't been like nibbled on the way there, or, just kind of like clean. What is clean abstinence? Kind of what does that look like without it being, militant and, whipping myself? I want peace. I wanted freedom from food obsession. And, even with being shown how to eat by a sponsor, as I've just sort of outlined there, with the beginning, a middle, and an end, and with gaps, I got to step 4, even with that structure, and I picked up, and I thought, what, and I just thought this, and I just thought I really was a bit beside myself, and I felt quite hopeless, and I thought this program isn't going to work for me. I'm that hopeless one, that is incapable of being honest with themselves. And what I realized is that, I was surrounded by insanity. And for me personally, I needed to make some different choices, so that I could support my abstinence and I could put my recovery first. And that really meant, I remember my sponsor at the beginning saying, Charlotte, are you willing to go to any lengths? And I was like, oh, don't be extreme. I don't don't get extreme with me or anything, kind of like, and I'm dying in the food. And I thought it was, and then I started to change my thinking. And when I started to get, I suppose, surrender, that's the word, surrender, to really see that I'm powerless, I'm going to die, and if not of like literally body ailments from the food, from actually feeling suicidal despair in the food, just not being able to put it down. Because for me, it got more and more painful in recovery to stay in the food, especially going to well meetings where I could see people that, had a program and had an answer, had a solution for that day, just for today. I'm as close to the next compulsive bite as anyone in here is, whether they've got a day, a year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever. If I don't work my program, I can go right back to where I've come from. And I'm really aware of that today. There's no place for arrogance or vigilance is what's important for me. And I started the step one again after the step four. I looked at what I'd been eating, I looked at my behavior, and then I got to step six. And interestingly, I parted company with my sponsor at that point, and I knew that she it wasn't her, but I justified that it was her that was the problem. And it was the relationship actually that I refused to look at. It was just so unwell for me that me personally, my recovery couldn't flourish, whilst engaging in that behavior. And I realized then that my behavior is linked to, I did my if I'm continually going to engage in dishonest and harmful behavior, it's either to myself or other people. My defects are dangerous if they are not given up to the higher power. And I go back to the food. That's where I end up. If I carry on in the same behavior as I did when I was in the food and try to maintain some kind of white knuckled abstinence, it doesn't work. And that was my revelation, really. And I realized then that I had an issue with surrendering my will and my life to a higher power. And it started with the food. I still wanted to include certain things that weren't right, or, as they say, don't they have my cake and eat it? I really didn't want this to be a spiritual solution. And that was my thing. It could be different for you, so I do say take what you want and leave the rest. This is one of thousands of meetings, but I realized I really didn't want a relationship with a higher power, even though the big book said I could have my own concept. Step two talked about we came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Not will, it's not a given. It means I have to do something. And I did this job description of a higher power. And I remember, the first one that I did, I was asked to do a job description based on, it says in italics, again, I can't remember the page number, so I will have a scout about in the break. But why don't you choose your own conception of God? It says in italics, in the big book. And I thought, I thought that was somehow that wasn't right, was it? How can I, who doesn't believe in anything, choose a concept of a higher power? It seemed almost blasphemous. But I thought again, Charlotte, my sponsor, why don't you just do it, Charlotte? You can always go back to what you had beforehand. Just give it a go. And, it's just, so surrender for me was painful. It took me a long time to, trust the process. And I started to get by post-it notes. I still have them 17 years later. Here are my post-it notes. When I hear something in a meeting that I think, yeah, that's great. And in my early recovery, I had on the back of the door, I was living in a women's refuge at the beginning of my recovery. It wasn't fantastic circumstances. There was no one else in recovery or embarking upon any recovered solution. And I worked my socks off. My compulsive overeating had led me there. Again, it may not be as extreme or it may be worse, I don't know. But what I realized is it wasn't my circumstances that were making me eat. It was the choices I was making, but fundamentally, I'm a compulsive overeater. And if I don't want to put the food down, I never will. And that's what I learned for me. And at some point, I needed to put the food down and feel the feelings. And I really believed, and I still have to work my program today, I really believed that the feelings were so painful that there was no human way possible I was ever going to not pick up and be able to process them. And just like my meal plans or my meals, I realized then that feelings have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I do have to hold on for dear life whilst experiencing them. And that's why I realized then that I need a fellowship. And it's all, they say it's a we program. It's not I admitted I'm powerless or I came to believe. There's a lot of we's in the big book. So I realized that this is unity. I mean, what was Relapse Day? Was it tradition one? Unity. I think it was unity. I can't do the program if I'm disunified with you guys, if I'm taking your inventories or looking for the differences, trying to isolate myself or exclude myself from you. I may not have the same story or the same food plan or the same this, but it's important that I don't isolate myself from my fellows. It's very important. And still today, I've been at this for a while now, I think 21 years coming up. And it's the only thing that's ever worked. And, I got here, and I
Got
really
5 minutes
hated it.
left.
Thanks. I hated it because I didn't want to be a compulsive overeater. So anyway, hopefully this is making sense. But my concept of a high power. And I wrote down about 100 attributes that I needed personally in my own life, abstinence being the first one. I needed something that was going to supernaturally help me in the kitchen. I needed something that was going to help me with my food shopping. Do it once a week at a sensible time, not after work when I'm starving and I go and smash and grab, go in the shops every day, and tempting myself. It's like the alcoholic getting sober. You wouldn't ask them, why don't you just, can you nip and get me a bottle of orange juice from the local boozer? You just you just wouldn't do it, and it's about having space from that. So I learned how to do a food shop and not go down the aisles initially. That, today I can bake, I can have stuff in the fridge that goes spoil. I don't eat it, it's none of my business. But I do have family members and stuff who aren't like me. In the beginning it was literally, you're not coming in my house, and you can't you can't have sugar in your coffee, or you can't do any of this. This for me, sugar was just an issue. Is I don't go near it only because it makes me into a lunatic. And I wouldn't wish that myself on anyone. But anyway, I had about 100 things that I needed this higher power to be, and I needed a power of love. I needed something that would help me love myself, because I really didn't like myself much when I came in. And that's what the steps for me, step one and step two, and were all about separating me from the food. And step three then was about making a decision for me to work the rest of the program to look at my spiritual baggage, shall we say, coming in with a lot of stuff. And has recovery been easy one day at a time? No, it hasn't actually. I've had depression in recovery. I'm had cancer twice, in the last breast cancer in the last 4 years, and I'm still having treatment for that. Bless God, I am cancer free as I stay here today. But it hasn't been easy, having to go to any lengths and do my step 1, 2, and 3, write my food plan down, and speak to medical people about, look, I'm a compulsive overeater, I have a food plan, how are you going to work my treatment around that? Because I'm not willing to relapse for the medication. So we're going to have to work together on this. Now, if I was in the food or sitting in that shame, I sat in shame the first 3 years in OA. I didn't want to be here. Who wants to be an Overeaters Anonymous? And even my family now, they still laugh. They still smile. It's not my business. I don't care. They can think what they like. One day I may be that woman with the big book in her hand, and they may need my help. They can think what they like. But I wasn't like that all the time. Learning how to say no in recovery when, I don't know about you, but, I've got a family that want me to eat certain things at certain festivals, like, Christmas or Easter or this or that, and it's learning how to say no, thank you, and not have to give my life story or what I'm doing in program, just be able to say no, thank you. No, it's okay, no worries. And not have to make the whole meal about me. And this has taken a process of maturity. And that was the other thing I wanted to share. What I'd learned is I really cringe at having to take responsibility for myself. And I learned that through my relapses, is that growing up isn't easy. I started binging when I was 6. So I believe and these are my belief, I came here as a child, emotionally, and I've grown up in OA, and I haven't done it on my own. you know, working steps 4 through to 9, looking at that stuff, looking at defects of character, it's been really hard. And I needed a sponsor and loving fellows to support with that. And yeah, I think this is why we have meetings, isn't it? It's experience, strength, and hope. I may hear something today that's going to carry me through the day, but I do the same thing on repeat, and I've done that for 17 years. You know, about, you know, my steps 1, 2, and 3 in the morning. I write down my food plan, and when I can get funky with my thinking, you know, and maybe like, oh, can I take this? Or can I take that? You know, it could be something new, or the grief of seeing a new chocolate bar on a bus stop, you know, like never having eaten it, you know, I just, I'll ring your sponsor, ring a fellow, chat about it there, you know, and dealing with life on life's terms, and working, being here today. I think that's my beat, isn't it? So I hope that's made sense, and I hope, yeah, you know, whatever. Thank you for listening to me for half an hour. Bye bye.